The Red Heifer. Some of you might have heard of it. Some of you might not have heard of it. I think it's going to start becoming a big deal sooner and sooner, especially if this sacrifice in Jerusalem ends up happening. So I did a bunch of research, and I'm going to try really, really hard to do this story justice. It's a very complicated subject, and if you look up anything on YouTube, you get a lot of words you don't understand, you get a lot of people you don't know, a lot of history that you probably have to do some research on yourself. So I tried to break this down in as clear and concise way I possibly could. So if you guys have any questions, definitely comment. Let's try and get right into it. So, what is the red heifer? Red heifer comes from the book of Numbers, where it is specified what constitute a perfect heifer and how it is used in a purification ritual. So in Jewish folklore, there's a purification ritual. This includes killing the red heifer. In their, I guess you could call it folklore or prophecy or books or whatever it is, the purpose of this sacrifice is to purify the children of Jerusalem, or no, the children of Israel from contact with a dead corpse, because in Jewish mythology, a dead corpse is the biggest form of impurity. So this is how you purify them. Now, from what I know about this ceremony, you have to kill the red heifer and use its ashes to purify tools, and then that tools are used to then purify the children that have touched the dead corpse. According to Jewish text, a red heifer is a cow that is entirely red in color, so there can't be more than 2 black hairs or 2 white hairs next to each other. It can't have any blemishes or markings, so especially in America, that is super rare because we tag all of our cows. Or we spray them, to count them. And has never been used for work. Another extreme rarity when it comes to cows. But they can't even be hit or struck or kicked or any of that. They have to be extremely pure. On top of all of that, they have to be younger than 3 years old. All right. Since Moses, 9 red heifers have been sacrificed, and it is said in Jewish lore that the 10th red heifer must be sacrificed before the 3rd temple of Jerusalem can be built. This all signifies the coming of the Messiah, or Christians believe the second coming of Jesus. It is important to note that the Christians believe the 10th red heifer was Jesus himself when he died on the cross. So a little bit of difference between Jewish folklore and Christianity folklore, but they kind of tie into each other as we get farther down this line. After King David conquered Jerusalem and made it its capital in 1000 BC, so before Christ, 1,000 years before Jesus lived, King Solomon built a temple to worship God. Okay, this is the first temple. The building was known as the First Temple of Solomon. It was destroyed in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so the first red heifer was sacrificed by Moses. The second red heifer was sacrificed by another prophet in the first red temple, or the first temple of Solomon. Okay. All right. The second temple of Solomon was built in 37 BC. Okay, so almost Jesus. Not quite there yet. When King Herod enlarged the Temple Mount, okay, so where the temple was built, and rebuilt this new temple. In this temple, the 3rd through 9th red heifer was sacrificed. Okay, very, very, very important, because we're sitting on the 10th red heifer right now, and we know from Christian folklore that the 10th red heifer was supposed to be Jesus. So according to Christians, Jesus was the 10th red heifer. According to Jewish, they still haven't done the 10th red heifer yet. So if you ask Jews, the 10th red heifer, the last red heifer hasn't been sacrificed for over 2,000 years. Okay, this is 2024. The 9th red heifer was sacrificed in 34 BC. Okay, so we got that established. All right, during the Roman period in 70 AD, okay, so the second red temple existed throughout all of Jesus' life. In 70 AD, the second temple was destroyed along with Jerusalem. Okay, got it. So important to know, first and second temple and all 9 heifers have been sacrificed before Jesus was born. The second temple was then destroyed in 70 AD, okay, about 40 years after Jesus' death. Jesus died in like 30 AD, something like that. 30, 40, 80, somewhere in there. All right. So it is important to note that in order to continue this ritual, you not only have to have the ashes of the red heifer, but you have to have the ashes of the previous red heifers. So as we go into this timeline, just keep in mind. In 1947 through 1956, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Okay, this is a big deal. So we had the Bible at the time, but the Dead Sea Scrolls were the ancient Hebrew translations of the Bible. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are really important because they verified that the Bible stories were true. There was a second source. We also got it, instead of just taking the word of the Catholics who were distributing the Bible at the time, we actually got the source material and were able to translate the ancient Hebrew, then verifying the stories in the Bible. Okay, so Dead Sea Scrolls very important in the history of the Bible if you know anything about that. All right. So along with the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found the Copper Scroll. The Copper Scroll is important in all kinds of other lore, so I just wanted to put it in here. And a pot containing the ashes of the previous 9 heifers. So not only in the last 2,000 years have we not found a perfect red heifer, but we would have never been able to do the purification process until we had the ashes of the previous 9 heifers. So we found the ashes of the previous 9 heifers in with the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 40s and 50s. So super important because now we have all of the materials for this purification process. We're just waiting on a red heifer. We have established that we have the first and second temple, very important because in the prophecy, the third temple is required in order for all these other things. So we're waiting on the third temple and we're waiting on the 10th heifer. We have all the materials. Now we're just waiting on that one red heifer. Okay. So in 2023, 5 red heifers were found in Texas and transported to Israel. Since their arrival, 1 has been disqualified. Additionally, no one knows where they are keeping the remaining heifers. It is presumed that the Temple Institute, the Jewish sect responsible for the red heifers, is keeping the location secret in order to preserve their purity. So pretty much um, what this whole red heifer sacrifice signifies is for the Jews, it sacrifices the coming of the Messiah, and for the Christians, it represents the beginning of the rapture. Okay, if you know anything about the rapture, it's kind of the end of the world. It's Ragnarok for Christians. A lot of people will be ascended and purified, and it's a whole 7-year process. Okay, so it signifies the beginning of the rapture. Really big deal for Christians and Jews. So there could be people out there with malintent who don't want to see this happen. So what would they do? They'd go and find those red heifers and they'd unpurify them. All they'd have to do literally is throw a rope around their neck or stab them or paint them, or it wouldn't be that hard whatsoever to unpurify these cows. So this Jewish sect, the Temple Institute, people who want to rebuild the temple, the third temple that is, are keeping this extremely private and extremely secret so that the purity of these cows can be preserved. All right. Now, these red heifers must be sacrificed before they turn 3, and it is rumored that they will turn 3 in June, making many people speculate that this sacrifice will happen sometime over Passover. Okay, so this is very important because Passover is extremely important for the Jews. This sacrifice is extremely important for the Jews. Also, there's been some images circulating around online of the Jewish Temple Institute building a sacrifice mound. And that has its all kinds of lore and stuff about where it needs to be placed and things like that. So as we get closer and closer to this, the anticipation is heightening. We don't know a lot of information on whether the sacrifice will or won't happen, but we do know that there's a lot of preparations and we have all of the materials. All right. It is good to note that the rabbi overseeing the sacrifice has reported he is waiting for a sign from God to start the ceremony. So that is really important because he hasn't got the necessary information from the heavens, or at least what he thinks are the heavens, to sacrifice this cow. All right. Many believe the sacrifice of the red heifer will signify the beginning of the rapture, and many Jews believe after the red heifer is sacrificed, this means they must build the third temple of Jerusalem, which would need to be built on the same grounds as the previous 2 temples, meaning in order to build on this land, the Dome on the Rocks, which is a Muslim temple must first come down. So if you're following anything with the Israel-Palestine conflict, this is really scary because if Jews take down the most sacred temple for Muslims, then that could cause all-out war and conflict, which also is something that was prophesied in the Rapture, which makes it that much more scary. Um, that being said, this temple in Christianity is said to be where the Antichrist pronounces himself God and where Jesus will descend from heaven and to be recognized by the Jews as the Messiah. So, for the Jews, the Messiah is coming. For us, it's the second coming of Jesus. And for us, we think that when Jesus descends down from the heavens, the Jews will then recognize him as their Messiah, something that Christians think they should have done back in Jesus's life, but a great reason to accept Jesus into your life in the second coming. An amazing opportunity. So yes, this temple has the third temple of Jerusalem has a lot of different implications in the rapture and the end times. And in order to build this temple, we must sacrifice this cow. Additional notes: we thought we found a red heifer back in the 90s. It ended up being unpure, so we weren't able to sacrifice them. So a lot of people thought at that time that we were gonna start this whole kind of end of world conflict. But now we have 4 of them, so the likelihood of getting one of them staying perfect is pretty high. We're definitely going to see all of this unfold in the next couple of months, so I'll keep you guys tuned as things kind of ramp up. I'm sure that if this sacrifice does happen, it's going to be worldwide news coverage. So you definitely heard it here first, which is awesome. There are a couple of videos online, but I think they're really confusing. I hope that I did a good job at laying this out in really simple terms. I did a ton of research on all of these talking points and tried to find the most important information to get out to you guys. I read this over and over with other people to make sure that there wasn't any questions. So if you guys have any questions, please comment. I would love to be able to answer this, and we will see. Alrighty, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and that's all, folks.